Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something really interesting. It's a research paper all about the MALTA2 sensor.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one.
So this MALTA2 sensor, it's designed to be so sensitive it can pick up particles 1 billion times smaller than like a grain of sand.
It's like trying to build a camera that can see a single atom.
Right. And, I'm not a physicist, but reading this paper that you sent over, I was fascinated by just how much work goes into calibrating these sensors.
Yeah.
Like making sure they're actually measuring what they're supposed to be measuring.
Oh, yeah. It's absolutely crucial. And it's surprisingly complex. You can't just, turn it on and expect it to work perfectly.
So can we start with the basics? What exactly is the MALTA2 sensor and what makes it so special?
So the MALTA2, it's this incredibly sophisticated piece of technology. It's called a depleted monolithic active pixel sensor, or DMAPS for short.
DMAPS.
And basically what it does is it converts tiny little particles passing through it into electrical signals that scientists can then analyze.
So it's kind of like a digital fingerprint of these particles.
Exactly. And because these particles are so small, the sensor has to be incredibly sensitive. It's designed to trigger when it detects at least 150 electrons.
150 electrons. That seems like such a tiny amount.
It is. It's like trying to hear a pin drop in the middle of a rock concert. You need a really, really sensitive microphone to pick up that sound. And that's essentially what the MALTA2 is. It's a super sensitive microphone for the subatomic world.
So if it's already designed to be so sensitive, why is calibration so important? Shouldn't it just work out of the box?
Well, imagine you have a really fancy scale that can weigh things down to the microgram.
Okay.
But if that scale isn't properly calibrated, it might tell you that a feather weighs a kilogram.
It would mess up a few recipes.
Exactly. It's the same with the MALTA2 sensor. Without precise calibration, the data it collects would be meaningless. It'd be like trying to read a book written in a language you don't understand.
So how do they actually go about calibrating something so sensitive?
Well, the researchers use a few different techniques, but a key one is a dedicated charge injection circuit. It's kind of like a tiny little syringe that injects a precise amount of charge into the sensor.
So they're giving the sensor a known signal to see how it responds.
Yeah, exactly. And then they can adjust the sensor settings until it's responding correctly to that signal. And they also use a source of X-rays called F55.
Wait, X-rays? Like the ones they use at the dentist's office?
Yep, the same principle. But in this case, they're using the X-rays to deposit a very specific amount of charge into the sensor, 1,600 electrons to be precise.
Wow. So they're basically using X-rays to make sure the sensor is reading the right amount.
It's like using a standardized weight to calibrate a scale. You know exactly how much the weight should weigh, and you adjust the scale until it reads the correct value.
So the X-rays act like a benchmark, a known quantity that they can use to fine-tune the sensor.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And this whole process is incredibly meticulous. They have to calibrate each pixel in the sensor individually and make sure it's responding correctly and consistently.
It sounds incredibly time-consuming.
Oh, it definitely is. But it's absolutely essential for ensuring that the data they collect is accurate and reliable.
Well, you know what they say, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. You can't do good science with bad data.
So now that we've got this super sensitive sensor meticulously calibrated, how do scientists actually use it to make groundbreaking discoveries?
That's where things get even more interesting. We're going to dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. This is already blowing my mind.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, make sure you tune in for the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring how the MALTA2 sensor is helping scientists unlock the secrets of the universe. Okay, so we've got this incredibly sensitive MALTA2 sensor. It's been meticulously calibrated to detect these tiny particles. What happens next? How do scientists actually use it to, do science?
Well, you can think of the calibrated sensor like a finely tuned instrument ready to play its part in an orchestra.
Okay, so instead of music, we're creating scientific discoveries.
Exactly. But just like any instrument, you need to know its range, its limits, what it can and can't do.
Right. So what are the limits of the MALTA2? What's the smallest signal it can pick up?
That's a great question. And that's what the researchers focused on next. They were trying to determine the detection threshold of the sensor.
The detection threshold?
Yeah, it's the minimum amount of energy a particle needs to have in order to be reliably detected. Think of it like setting the sensitivity on a motion sensor. You want it to trigger when a person walks by, but not when a leaf falls from a tree.
So the threshold is like drawing a line in the sand. separating the real signals from the background noise.
Exactly. And remember, we're dealing with particles that produce incredibly faint signals.
Yeah.
So this threshold needs to be incredibly precise.
Okay, so how do they figure out this threshold?
Well, they tested the sensor under different conditions,
Right.
including a special low-gain setting.
Low gain.
Yeah, it's like switching from a regular camera lens to a telephoto lens. The low-gain setting allows them to zoom in and detect particles with much higher energies.
So they're basically expanding the sensor's range,
Right.
making it capable of detecting a wider variety of particles.
Exactly. And they found that they could fine-tune the threshold by adjusting a specific parameter in the sensor's circuitry.
Okay, and what's this parameter called?
It's called ITHR, and they were able to adjust it with incredible precision. They could actually quantify the threshold in terms of the number of electrons detected.
So they knew exactly how many electrons it took to trigger the sensor.
Precisely, which means they can directly link the sensor's response to the energy of the particles hitting it. It's like having a speedometer that tells you not only how fast a car is going, but also how much fuel it's burning.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. But did they run into any issues while measuring this threshold?
Interestingly, they found that the threshold varied slightly from pixel to pixel.
Wait, so even with all the careful calibration, there was still some variation?
Yeah, it's like a choir, where each singer is slightly off-key from the others. They called this variation the threshold resolution, and it turned out to be around 10%.
So even with the most advanced technology, there's still a degree of uncertainty.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we're always dealing with some level of uncertainty in science.
Right, it's like trying to measure a piece of string. You might get a slightly different answer each time depending on how you hold it.
That's a good analogy. But by being aware of this uncertainty, we can account for it and still draw meaningful conclusions from our data.
Earlier, we talked about how radiation can affect the calibration of these sensors. Did the researchers look into that at all?
They did. They exposed several MALTA2 sensors to different levels of neutron radiation.
So they basically bombarded them with neutrons to see how they held up.
It was a controlled experiment, of course. And they found that as the radiation dose increased, the voltage needed to inject the equivalent of the FEF55 signal actually decreased.
Wait, so radiation makes the sensor more sensitive?
It might seem counterintuitive, but radiation can actually alter the properties of the sensor's materials, making it more responsive over time.
It's like the sensor's getting better with age.
In a way, yes. And this is really important for experiments conducted in high radiation environments, like particle accelerators.
So that they need to account for the effects of radiation in order to get accurate results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like adjusting the settings on your camera when the light changes. You need to adapt to the environment to get a clear picture.
You know, it's amazing how much we've learned just from talking about this one tiny sensor.
It really highlights the complexity and the beauty of scientific research.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. And with each layer, we uncover something new and fascinating.
And we're not done yet. There's still more to explore about the MALTA2 sensor and the incredible world it reveals.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about the MALTA2 sensor, this incredibly sensitive device that can pick up particles so small they're practically invisible.
Yeah, it's like having a microscope that can see into the heart of matter itself.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
We've learned so much about how it works, how it's calibrated, how it's affected by radiation.
It's a testament to the incredible work being done in particle physics.
Speaking of incredible work, you mentioned earlier that this sensor could have applications beyond just particle physics.
Oh, absolutely. The sensitivity of the MALTA2 opens up all sorts of possibilities in other fields.
So what are some of those possibilities? Like, what other areas could this technology be used in?
Well, one area that immediately comes to mind is medical imaging. Imagine being able to detect tiny tumors or other abnormalities long before they'd be visible with current technology.
That would be a game changer for early diagnosis and treatment.
Exactly. It's like having a superpower that lets you see through the human body with incredible detail.
And what about other fields besides medicine?
Well, materials science is another area with huge potential. Imagine using the MALTA2 to analyze the structure of materials at the atomic level.
That could revolutionize how we design and engineer everything from airplanes to computer chips.
It's like having a window into the building blocks of matter.
So this research really has the potential to ripple outward, impacting our lives in ways we can only begin to imagine.
It's a perfect example of how scientific breakthroughs can have unexpected consequences, leading to advancements in seemingly unrelated fields.
It's like dropping a pebble in a pond and watching the ripples spread out.
Yeah, and those ripples can sometimes create waves that change the entire landscape.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about particle physics and the incredible technology being used to explore it.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
So as we wrap up, what's the biggest takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of meticulous scientific work. The research we've been discussing might seem very specialized, very focused on a tiny little sensor,
Right.
but it represents a much broader pursuit of knowledge and understanding. And the dedication of these researchers, the precision they strive for, the unexpected discoveries they make along the way, it all contributes to a deeper understanding of the universe and our place in it.
It's a reminder that science is a process of constant discovery and refinement.
Exactly. And even the smallest discoveries can have a profound impact on our world.
Well, this has been an incredible journey into the world of particle physics. We've explored the intricate workings of the MALTA2 sensor, uncovered its remarkable sensitivity, and glimpsed its potential to revolutionize other fields. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you today.
The pleasure was all mine.
And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more about the incredible world of science. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of our universe.